there, my name is Natalie Silver. I just wanted to pop in here with my face. Before I get started on this presentation, I'm going to turn off my face in a minute because it just makes me a little nervous, but I wanted you to see that I am a real person and that I'm a very enthusiastic person about publishing. I am thrilled to be presenting for the Writers Workout March 2024 conference, and I can't wait to tell you more about transferable skills in editing and writing and how utilizing both can really enhance your publishing portfolio. Let's get started. So the purpose of this presentation is the following. I believe that to be a successful writer, you also need to cultivate your editing skills. And I think this works in the other direction. To be a good editor, you must also generate words and ideas. This presentation will give you ideas and suggestions on how to cultivate both skill sets to help you build a publishing portfolio. I will also highlight the various types of editors in the traditional book publishing process. This could help you navigate the publishing world better. So I want to introduce myself before I get too far into this presentation. I've been a bookworm and writer for my entire life. I was the kid staying up late reading and scribbling in notebooks from a very young age. I remember when I finished elementary school, I felt like I had read every book in the library. I majored in English and writing with an expository focus. In college, I went to Ithaca College in upstate New York. I'm a proud graduate. I have worked in publishing for 20 years. Before I became a freelancer, I was the managing editor at an independent book press. I started out as an editorial assistant and moved up. It was great to work for an independent book press because I was able to do a lot of different things there. And then I transitioned to freelance editorial services in 2012 and have been running my own business for more than a decade. In my freelance portfolio, I work as a book coach and help people who want to write or who are stuck in the writing process. I copy edit and proofread academic journals, trade books, and doctoral dissertations. I write articles for clients as well as blog posts for my two professional websites. My Silver Scribe editorial blog releases a monthly newsletter and some updates and writing tips, and I try to publish weekly on Natalie L. Silver to discuss reflections on life and work. I also facilitate a Facebook group for women who run their own businesses. If that describes you, please reach out and I would love to add you to the group. And I read over 100 books a year, and I'd love to see you connect with me on Goodreads. My name is Natalie Silver on there. So I wanted to first define the editing and writing roles and how they can interact and build on one another. I love this quote from Mary Karr. She says, "Every writer needs two selves, the generative self and the editor self." I'd like to piggyback off of this and add 3 stages to these two selves. So I think that I would divide it up as a sandwich. I would have the editing self as one piece of bread, which is planning and proactive. I would squish in the writing self as the filling, and that's the generating creative part. And then I would go back to the sandwich bread, if we're going to keep with this metaphor, and call it a refining, reactive editing self. So here's a little diagram of how I think the writing process and publishing process works based on my own experience. I think first you can use an editing self to plan your project. That means evaluating your audience, coming up with a plan, and creating a schedule. Next, I think you have to do the generating, which is the writing self. You need to create first and revise drafts, and you really need to immerse yourself in the process. Finally, there's an editing self that's refining the work. This is where you're polishing your work and spending quite a bit of time on it, from large scale to small scale edits. So I want to talk about the benefits of cultivating both editing and writing skills for your portfolio. I want to walk you through these 3 stages to demonstrate how learning about different editing roles can help improve your writing portfolio and publishing success. I will familiarize you with different types of editors and apply their roles to your own process. And this is based on my personal experience in publishing for 20 years. So I've broken these 2 editing selves into the following professional jobs. In a large publishing house, these editors might be filled by single people or entire departments. In independent publishing houses, one person may serve all these roles, or they may hire out freelancers for some of these roles. If you're self-publishing, you might be the only person doing all of these roles. So first, we have the acquisitions editor, managing editor, and developmental editor. These are part of the planning editing self. After the writing process, we have the line editor, copy editor, and proofreader as part of the refining editing self. So here's where the roles fall in the 3 stages of the writing process. The editing self, the planning stage, is the acquisitions editor, the managing editor, and the developmental editor. Next, you have the writing self where you're generating your work. Finally, you go back to the editing self and you refine the work by being a line editor, copy editor, and proofreader. So we'll start with the editing self that's planning. So this is how you're going to use your editing self to define your project, figure out what you need, and plan what you want to write. So first is the acquisitions editor. This person, in a traditional publishing sense, finds and signs books to a publisher and evaluates not only the quality of the work, but how it fits into the current marketplace and whether the project has an audience. Generally, the acquisitions editor is responding to a proposal that you would send in or an agent. Your inner acquisitions editor, if you were to take this on yourself, could figure out your audience for a writing project before you get started, look at competing works and the publishing market, and consider the potential for the work in the marketplace. Assuming an acquisitions editor role can help you clarify a writing project and consider its viability for publication before you start writing. Next is the managing editor role. This one is near and dear to my heart because I've been a managing editor at not only a book press, but I was also the managing editor for my college newspaper. I am definitely a managing editor at heart. A managing editor does, you guessed it, the managing. They coordinate the production schedule and they hire freelancers during different stages of the publishing process. If you were to take on this role, your inner managing editor could create a writing calendar, assign due dates to a first draft and a finished draft, determine a budget, figure out what help you need and hire that help, and then check in on your calendar regularly to make sure everything is running smoothly. A managing editor role can help you organize a writing project and keep it on schedule. I just have to go on a little bit more about what a managing editor can do. I love this quote from Elizabeth Gilbert in her book Big Magic and highly recommend it for anyone who is taking on a creative endeavor. Her quote is, "I keep remembering what my mother always used to say, done is better than good." If you take on a managing editor role with your project, you can avoid the trap of perfectionism and get your project done when you assume this role. Finally, the last editing self before you get to the writing might be a developmental editor. In a traditional context, a developmental editor digs into the content, thinks about the audience, looks for the unique take on a subject or point of view, creates an outline, drafts chapter headings, plans what each chapter will say, and looks at structure, voice, tone, and so forth. If you were to take on this role, your inner developmental editor could plan your writing before you begin, create a main thesis or narrative to work with throughout the book, draw up an outline and add some structure before writing, or chunk out chapters and assign chapter titles. Developmental editing can help you create an overall plan before you begin to write. Next, I want to talk about the writing part of the publishing process, and I think this is probably why you're here. So it's time to put your plan into action and generate the work. I'll start here with another quote. This is from Rachel Herron, who self-published a wonderful instructional book on writing your memoir called Fast Draft Your Memoir, Write Your Life Story in 45 Hours. She says, "We learn most from putting our butts in the chair and writing badly. Every day that you write, you're getting better. This is true. Believe it, even if you can't feel it yet." I suspect you know a lot about the writing self, but I just wanted to put some thoughts out there. The planning stage that I discussed about in the first stage of the editing self can prepare you to write. You can refer back to those plans you made in these roles when you write, but I would recommend not focusing too much on those roles when you're writing. The writing phase should be the creative phase of the process, and this requires you to sit down and produce rather than plan. Here's another quote from Rachel Herron. "Keep writing and revision separate. There will be time to fix the terrible draft later." I don't mean to zoom through the writing process, but I know that this conference has many experts to discuss all of the components of writing. I consider myself to be more of an expert on editing, so I will jump forward to the editing self in the refining part of the process. This is where you will tighten and polish your draft. I want to share a quote from Mary Karr, who wrote The Art of Memoir, which is another great instructional book, a little less pragmatic and a little bit more idealistic about the writing process for memoir. She says, "For me, the last 20% of a book's improvement takes 95% of the effort, all in the editing." I want to share a few thoughts that are near and dear to my heart before I go into the actual job descriptions of the editing selves in this stage. Before we get too far in this stage of the publishing process and the editing self, I want to warn you to not be the grammar police. It's very simplistic to think that editing, even copy editing and proofreading, is just a role for the grammar police. That's just not true. In most books, there will be errors, and they are not the end of the world. My mentor from 20 years ago, one of the first lessons she taught me is there's no such thing as a perfect book. While there are certainly some grammar rules, there's a lot more flexibility in the written word than you might think. One key is to keep the treatment of words and language consistent. The Chicago Manual Style, my preferred style book, and its related entities, its Q&A, and its affiliated book, The Subversive Copy Editor, which I'll touch on later, encourage gentleness and flexibility. I just wanted to put this out here to remind you that even in this stage of your project, it won't be perfect. You could benefit from hiring professionals to edit your drafts, but I don't want you to live thinking that pointing out typos is what editors do. There is nuance to the editing process, and it's all about staying consistent and keeping perspective. On the previous slide, I mentioned The Subversive Copy Editor by Carol Fisher Seller. I want you to take heart with this quote in the writing and editing process. The writer's job is far more difficult than the copy editor's. She has to actually write the thing. It is your privilege to polish a manuscript without the tedium and agony of producing it in the first place. Your first goal isn't to slash and burn your way through in an effort to make it conform to a list of style rules. Your first goal is merely to do no harm. While of course you will probably be more respectful of your own work when you're copy editing and proofreading, I want you to keep this quote in mind when you're working on your project or someone else's, or even hiring a copy editor. Now I want to get back to our regularly scheduled programming. That tangent is over. At this point, you might be able to be your own line editor after the writing stage. A line editor looks at the work line by line, considers word choice and syntax, reads through for flow, tightens the writing, and adds missing details or points them out. At this stage, this is less about moving significant chunks of writing around. Your developmental, editing, and writing self will take that on. But this is also less about polishing, which will come from your inner copy editor. Line editing will help you go through your writing sentence by sentence. Here's a quote from Stephen King's On Writing, which is a lovely memoir of his writing career. He quotes someone named Gould, and he says, "When you write a story, you're telling yourself the story. When you rewrite, your main job is taking out all the things that are not the story." This is what you would want to keep in mind when you're line editing. Next, once you have a polished draft, or almost polished draft, it's time to take on the role of copy editor. A copy editor looks for grammar usage and style errors, edits for consistency, and formats the text for typesetting and design. You often hear the Chicago Manual of Style, which I mentioned before. That's a style book that you can use for copy editing. Copy editing can be hard to do with your own work because you are so close to the project, but I think it's important to refine these skills if you plan to write a lot. In college, I took a class called Grammar Usage and Style, and it was actually fun. There's something so simple and straightforward about looking at language through the lens of these topics. I highly encourage you to consider polishing up these skills if you feel like you're lacking. Finally, copy editing can help you get your work ready for design and publication. Next is the proofreader. You don't proofread until your project is finished, polished, and designed. A proofreader looks for egregious errors, marks up any weird formatting issues or inconsistencies. I have to note here, you are not rewriting the text at this point. You should be your own proofreader and also hire a professional to do it. That's what I think, at least. 2 sets of trained eyes are better than 1. Plus, fresh eyes may catch things you can no longer see. Proofreading is the final look at your project before it's published. I wanted to make sure to give you some tips about how to cultivate your copy editing and proofreading skills. This is something that I had to work on when I first started in publishing, and it's something that I have excelled at by taking on a constant learning process. So, here are some of my tips to learn more about grammar, usage, and style. Look everything up. That includes spelling and style questions. If you're using Chicago, you will get more and more used to things that you want to look up. And I have to tell you that after 2 decades in publishing, I am still looking up terms and rules and guidelines. Go to the dictionary. I like merriam-webster.com, but you may have another one that you prefer. And there are a lot of online resources for MLA, APA, and Chicago styles, which I think are frequently used. The Purdue OWL website has a lot of helpful free editing information. In fact, if you Google a question about style related to one of these style books, or even just a grammar rule, often the Purdue OWL website will pop up first in a Google search. Finally, look up definitions of words on your Kindle when you read to expand your vocabulary. This is one of my favorite features about an ebook reader. I am currently reading more print books to start the year, and I'm a little sad that I can't just press the word and find out the definition. Next, be proactive. Sign up for newsletters about editing, like the Chicago Manual Styles monthly Q&A. This really takes on that perspective I was talking to you before about in the Grammar Police slide. It's a very gentle and informative way to copy edit. You can read websites. I like Grammar Girl. There's the link there. And you can take a virtual or in-person class on grammar, usage, and style. I mentioned to you before I did that as an undergraduate, but there are certainly many options for brushing up on these skills on the internet and in person. Now that I've gone through in detail the advantages of taking on an editing self when you're writing, I wanted to flip the idea and talk about when your writing self can help your editing self. I truly believe editors can benefit from writing and writing frequently. So here are some of the reasons why I think editors need to write. An editor can benefit from not only practicing editing skills, but also writing skills. As I mentioned before, writing is a generative process, and putting together words on a regular basis can help you appreciate the work of others. I believe writing frequently helps you cultivate your voice, and it puts you in the practice to lay down words more quickly. I'm sure that you are writing a lot if you are attending this workshop, but I would just encourage you to do it as much as possible. And I think blogging, though it has, died down in popularity, is one of the easiest ways to maintain a frequent writing practice. I have one final topic to add to this presentation. Let's not forget the importance of reading. I truly believe you should read as much as possible to strengthen your writing and editing skills. Stephen King sums it up best with this quote: "You learn best by reading a lot and writing a lot, and the most valuable lessons of all are the ones you teach yourself." Finally, I would just want to sum up my presentation. I believe that writing and editing can work together, but I would caution you to not do them at the same time. You can channel different editing roles during the publishing process to benefit your writing self. I wanted to make sure to include a list of all the books I've cited in this presentation. I think all of these are wonderful if you are part of the creative process or the editing and writing process. I would encourage you to look these up if you feel like you could brush up on some skills in these areas. Hi there, I'm back one more time to give you a look at my face before I sign off. Thank you for watching this presentation, and I hope you learned more about the different editorial roles in the writing and publishing process. I'm available as a book coach, editor, and writer. You can look up more about me at silverscribeeditorial.com. I wish you the best of luck in learning as much as you can in this conference, and as well as in your publishing endeavors. Goodbye.